I went to Heroes Con 2025 and all I got was, well, I mean, not this lousy t-shirt, but I did come home with some amazing comics, some questionable decisions, and a suitcase that barely survived the overhead storage in American Airlines flights. If you've ever wondered what happens when you unleash a comic nerd like me on one of the best cons in the country, stick around. From digging through dollar bins to dodging cosplayers and surviving the queue line at CGC's on-site grading, I saw it all. Coming up, a weekend's worth of chaos, comics, and convention madness. Let's roll the tape. Then I'll show you exactly what I brought home and what I thought of the whole adventure. Spoiler, my wallet did not have a good time. Hey everybody, it's Drew with Como Comic Books. I am walking through beautiful, hot Charlotte, North Carolina on my way back into the convention floor for Heroes Con 2025. The show has been crazy so far. I got all my big events out of the way yesterday, so I've just been chilling a little bit today, but it's time to hit the floor, shoot a little footage, take you guys with me. So if you're not here this weekend, you can get in on the action and see exactly what you've been missing. The show has been really great so far, so I'm excited for you guys to be able to check it out. See you inside. Well, it's getting to be that time. It's about midday, noon here, Sunday at Heroes. And unfortunately, I've got a plane to catch. So this is pretty much the end of the con experience for me this weekend. Had a great time, seen so many great people from all over the country, different countries. It's just been an excellent time here in Charlotte this weekend. So if you've never been to Heroes, do yourself a favor, make it out here. It's unlike anything else I've ever been to. It's still a comic show. It's not what Comic-Con has been taken over with in recent years, you know, and Comic-Con in name only. This is, honest to God, 80% comics, 20% everything else, as opposed to a regular Comic-Con. Nice, buddy. A regular Comic-Con, which is 20% comics and 80% everything else. As you can see, comics. They're everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and wind it down. Time to head back across the street to the hotel, get everything squared away there, and make my way to the airport. And I will see you guys back in the comic room. I hope you enjoyed the montage there. It was a bit of a montage from all across the weekend. But now let's get into some of the things I came home with. First up, I came back with my Marvel Premiere Edition Spider-Man Death of the Stacys, signed by Jerry Conway. He was one of the creators that was gonna be at the show that I was legitimately the most excited about. He doesn't make a lot of appearances. I've never seen him in my area, and this was actually his first appearance at Heroes Con as well. I don't know if you're familiar with Jerry, but he's not a particularly young man at this point anymore, and he's written some absolutely amazing stuff. My favorite of those being probably one of his more controversial stories, and that's when he decided that Gwen Stacy needed to take a leap off of a very tall building, or bridge in this case. So I had him sign this hardcover, which I picked up in a collection several years ago. It was just one of those things that I saw. I'm like, I'm going to keep that, because honestly, having a nice copy of what's inside this book, which is the death of Captain Stacy from ASM 88 to ASM 92, and then the death of Gwen Stacy and the Green Goblin from ASM 121 and 122. Having a really nice format copy of all of those in my collection, or I could just grab them and read them whenever I wanted to, was important to me. And now I've got Jerry Conway's signature on those. And honestly, I think that of all the people who worked on all of those stories, I think Jerry is the only one that's still with us. So when the opportunity came up to have him sign this book, I knew I had to take it. I actually gave it to my buddy who was waiting in line to have some other things signed. I hung out in line with him, but by the time I got to his line Saturday, he was only there Saturday, Sunday, his line was hours and hours long. So I didn't want to cut in front of everybody. I just kind of hung out with my buddy and then had him sign this for me. So yeah, this was one of the major highlights or priorities on my list, was to get Jerry Conway to sign this for me. And that's only one of two signatures that I came home with for the whole weekend, which I don't know how much you know about Heroes, but it is massive when it comes to Artist Alley and then their comic book related guests. The other thing I had signed was Marvel Premiere Classic Silver Surfer Rebirth of Thanos. Trying to get to where you can see it without the glare there. This is basically the story of how Thanos came back after dying in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't remember the exact date on that whole thing, but this is Jim Starlin from his run in Silver Surfer. Ron Lim was the artist on it, and Ron was actually at Heroes in addition to Jim, but I'd already had Jim sign this book at Planet Comic-Con several years back. So now I have Rebirth of Thanos signed by the artist and the writer, who also happens to be the creator of Thanos. So, you know, I got a good kick out of Ron. He kind of looked surprised when I handed him a hardcover to have signed. I said, no disrespect, man, but I don't care who anybody is. I don't like people writing on my comics. I don't care if you drew it. I don't care if you wrote it. You know, the comics are for me, the hardcovers. I love to have your signature. So he got a really good kick out of that, and I think he wound up laughing for most of the rest of our interaction there. But fun book. Glad to have it double signed now, and back on the shelf behind me it will go. So now let's start in on the big stuff. I don't know that this one's actually big other than size, but I bought a copy of Astounding Science Fiction. It's volume 21, number 6. The cover date is August 1938. It's my first ever pulp. Honestly, it's the only pulp I've ever really even been interested in. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular book, because I know I sure wasn't, the main appeal of it is that it contains a story titled Who Goes There? And this was the basis for the movies The Thing from Another World and also John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, Who Goes There was written by a guy named Don A. Stewart, no relation to me, at least not that I'm aware of. If so, I sure haven't gotten any royalties from any movies or anything, so I'm pretty sure no relation. The story starts on page 60. It goes through page 97. I figured it was going to be a fairly short or quick read. It's a little bit beefier than I anticipated. Eventually, I'll probably sit down and read this story, but most likely I'm going to do that online because there are some websites out there that have complete scans of this book so I can read it without handling it. Because I don't know how you guys are, but when it comes to handling almost 90-year-old paper, the less I can do that, the better I find. But I think it's a really cool cover. It's very sci-fi, kind of fits with the name, Astounding Science Fiction. Big shock there. Very futuristic, just fun. And I think now that I have a copy of this, I'm pretty well done with pulps as soon as I've begun with them, because this is really the only one I wanted. I don't have much interest in any of the other ones. Some of the covers are cool. The Batwoman cover, of course, is a classic, but for what it's worth, what it contributes to my collection, just doesn't do much for me. One interesting thing about this book, though, it was on the stands at the exact same time as Action Comics number 3 was. So this thing has been around a while. It actually is, this book is older than the character Batman. Batman came out the next summer. So pretty impressive. It's by far the oldest book in my collection now. I've got a 1941 issue of Detective, but as I just said, this is definitely older than Batman. So very happy to pick this up. I was honestly done after picking up the book we're going to talk about next. I spent all day Friday trying to work that deal. Well, one, find the book, work the deal, and get it sealed. And when I'd finally completed that, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm just going to chill for the rest of the weekend. And I was walking around with my buddy Tom from MSG Comics. We were just kind of riding the end of the show out on Friday or Saturday night. I don't even remember which night it was. I think it was Friday, actually. And we just happened to stop by this booth, and it was a nice booth. I'd been by several times looking at it over the course of the weekend. They had a nice run of Captain Science, lots of great pre-code horror stuff. But for whatever reason, I had not seen this, and I just kind of stopped as soon as I saw it. And I said, hey, can I see that? And they brought it to me. Had a $200 price tag on it, which I've been watching copies of this book for over a year on eBay. And it's rare to find it under $400 for the most part. And really, I think the one I'm watching now that's most comparable to this was priced somewhere in $350 to $400. It was in much worse shape. And when I saw the $200 price tag on this dude, the guy didn't even give me a chance to look at the book. He's just like, what do I got on it? I said 200. He's like, I'd take 180. I didn't even haggle. At that point, I was just so happy to find a nice copy of the book that was more than fairly priced. And if you're just going to instantly throw out a 10-point discount on something, I'll take that. I'm not going to beat you up more on it. I think it's a very fair deal. And I think that's one of the best examples that I have of not all the prices at Heroes being completely crazy. If you're out there and you work for it, you can find some good deals, some reasonable deals, just even fair market value or better out there. So that was kind of my unexpected surprise of the show. And being a big John Carpenter fan, enjoying the original version of The Thing, his version of it, having the story that series of movies originated from in my collection is pretty cool. And it's right up there with some of the books I was chasing in recent years that were inspiration for Alien, such as, I believe, Weird Science 8, Death Rattle 1, all those kind of crazy books. So very excited to have this. And now let's talk about the big one. So my whole plan with Heroes this year was I wanted to focus on quality, not quantity. I didn't want to go to one of the best shows in the country and spend my time digging through boxes, digging out piles of books to take back with me. Because usually when I do that, it's not things that are for my personal collection. It's for things that I think I can flip, that I can make money on, for the business side of it. And honestly, I wanted to go for me, and I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to work on my personal collection this year. So what that meant was I had a very tight list of books that I was looking for. I had about 3 tiers of books that I was even considering. I had 3 books in my top tier, I don't know how many in my second tier, and then the third tier was just kind of random thoughts. Again, the goal was quality, not quantity. The top tier books were pretty big hitters. Detective Comics 66, which is the first appearance of Two-Face. Detective Comics 140, which is the first appearance of the Riddler. As you can probably tell, I was in the target demographic the year Batman Forever came out, and ever since then, the Riddler and Two-Face have been my 2 favorite villains from the Bat universe. And the third book was Crime Patrol 15. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I've been working on completing my Tales from the Crypt run for quite a while now. Last spring, I picked up the Crime Patrol 16, so that put me at Crime Patrol 16 all through the 3 Crypt of Terror issues, and then all the way through issue 46 of Tales from the Crypt, meaning I just needed the Crime Patrol 15 to complete my Tales run. And as luck would have it, I went to Heroes, and all 3 of those books were there. So I had a choice. Essentially, what one was I going to go after? First thing I did was I had to look at prices. The first picture I took at the show was a picture of 2 raw copies of Detective Comics 140. Same guy had both of them. One was $11,500, the other one was $13,500. The lower grade one and cheaper one looked like it was about a 1.8, if I had to guess. The better one was about a 2, maybe a 2.5 at best. Well, the last sale at the time of a CGC 3.0 was $6,000 and something. So that's basically a non-starter. You can't negotiate with somebody who literally has their books more than double FMV as they sit on the wall. It's just, there's no respectful way to approach that dealer to begin that conversation. It just doesn't happen. That's obviously somebody who does not want to sell that book, in my opinion, because when you can literally go and buy multiple copies in better condition for the same money as what you're trying to sell yours for them, or what you're trying to sell yours for, it's just, there's no common ground there to even have a negotiation. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. There were some higher grade copies of the Detective 140 as well, but I knew to fit in my budget, I needed to stay in the lower end. A fairly priced 3.0, maybe a 3.5 would have been my max. There was a dealer, I believe it was High Grade Comics, who had a 4.0. As for Tech 66, I found one in the entire show. It was on the wall of a big national dealer, and I actually started there. That was the book. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and make an effort at this. CGC 3.0 priced at $9,600. First thing, okay, I had about $8,500 worth of trade bait and then several $1,000s in cash with me as well. So I've done this long enough. I know if you're going to trade into Golden Age, you need to have Golden Age. So I had a classic Matt Baker cover. I had a Schomburg World War II cover, timely cover. And then I also brought, let's see, what else did I have? I had my 8.5 or 8.0 Marvel Spotlight 5, and then I think I had a 2.5 Batman 121. So pretty decent trade bait, not a bunch of junk, not a ton of books, 4 pretty decently desirable books. I felt were at least in the ballpark to be a possibility for trade. So I talked to the dealer, do you have any interest in trade and cash for this book? And it was a non-starter from the beginning. I pretty well knew it was. I've traded with this guy before, but it was literally the last time I was at Heroes Con. That's the last time, and that was 9 years ago, that this guy had worked a trade with me. And it's not like it was a bad trade either. He did pretty good on it. But I just had nothing in what I traded him, but I digress. But he had no interest in trading, and without some trade credit with the cash I had, it was going to be one of those things again that it was going to pretty well just hollow out the war chest. I'm like, I don't want to do this right out of the gate. So at least at that point, I could stop thinking about that book and focus on whatever else I could find. Which leads me to Crime Patrol 15. As luck would have it, the very first booth I walked by, or you walked by when you entered the show, was Harley Yee's booth. Harley, as it turns out, bought the Roger Hill copy of Crime Patrol 15 that sold on Heritage last fall. It's a beautiful copy. It's a CGC 6.0. Went for absolute crazy money on that in that auction, and I saw it on Harley's wall, and it was actually listed for less than what it sold at Heritage last fall. Beautiful copy. I actually stopped and looked at it and took a picture over the course of the weekend. It was really great to see it, but it was kind of deflating because that is a book, if you're in a room and there's a copy of it, that's pretty awesome. It does not happen very often, and honestly, I think it's maybe the first or second copy of that book I'd ever seen in person. I'm not for sure, but I know it was the first time I'd ever had one in my hands. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, man, if that's the one for this show, I'm sunk, you know, I've got no play. So ran around, kind of got the lay of the land, kept working, and then eventually I came across a different booth, and I saw this guy hiding down on the bottom of their display wall. Why you put this book on the bottom shelf, I don't know. I didn't set up their wall, so don't ask me. But it would turn out this was a consignment book that somebody had given them to take to the show. And when I saw it, I'm like, okay, this is where I'm going. This is the book I'm going to focus on. I'm going to work whatever magic I have to get this thing home with me. So I started talking with the guy. It went really well. He told me it was a consignment. So the first thing we started with was, okay, you know, is the consigner interested in any of the trade bait I've got? Turns out he wasn't. Not a big deal. I knew there were some people there at the show that were buying, and I knew I had some books that they were interested in, so I could probably take a little bit of a hit on my profit margin on some of these things, but at least get enough money in hand to be able to close the deal and bring this book home. And that's exactly what I did. I wound up selling my Teenage Romances 32 and my Marvel Spotlight 5. Got enough cash on top of what I already had with me to pick this book up at a really great price. Just before Heroes started, I'd received a discounted rate or a discounted offer for a CGC 3.0 copy of Crime Patrol 15 on eBay. And the discounted rate was about $600 off, so it wasn't an insignificant discount, but the price was still $9,000. So this book, like I said, does not come up for auction very often. It can be tough to find in general. So even having a couple on eBay to choose from, it's a pretty good position to be in. But when I asked the seller to contact the consignor to find out, okay, what's your best offer or best number cash? He came back, he said $5,800. And I'm just, deal, you know, we're gonna make this happen. So I wound up selling those books, sprinkling a little extra cash on what I sold those for, and voila, Crime Patrol 15 is mine. My Tales from the Crypt run is now complete. I now have the first appearance of the Crypt Keeper, the first appearance of the Crypt of Terror, this beautiful Johnny Craig cover, and it's all mine. And it's awesome. I honestly can't believe that I'm here. It's taken me the better part of 13 years to complete this, so it's something I've been working on for a very long time. One thing I thought was interesting about the book, reprints of this in like the hardcovers that I buy, the EC Archives, kind of tough to come by. I don't think they actually made a Crime Patrol one, and it's not included in the earliest Tales from the Crypt ones. But while this is a Johnny Craig cover, the horror story inside is titled Return from the Grave, and it's actually all all Al Feldstein. So he wrote it, he drew it, and I never knew that. It was pretty awesome. So really happy to have this. And interestingly enough, the Tales from the Crypt journey began back in 2013 at Planet Comic-Con when I bought my first stack of Tales from the Crypt books from Dale Roberts of Dale Roberts Comics. In kind of a full circle moment, the dealer who had the Detective 66 that wasn't willing to work a deal with me at Heroes this year was Dale Roberts. So in Dale not working with me on the Tech 66, he in a way kind of helped me complete my Tales from the Crypt collection, which he helped me start. So, you know, the universe is a weird place, I guess. That's all I can say. But this was my big one. Super happy to have it. One I've been looking for a very, very long time. And there was actually a raw copy that sold on eBay earlier this spring for about $4,000. It's always a risk to go at something like that. So happy to have this guy, a nice 2.5. It's actually was previously owned by somebody named Mickey. You know, when I told Swag that, he's like, hey, that's my book. Thanks for finding it. You can go ahead and send it to me. Anyway, glad to have it. Glad to finish Tales. Now I'm probably going to start working on the other horror titles because, you know, why stop at Tales from the Crypt? Let's look at Vault of Horror and Haunt of Fear next. So now let's talk about some of my thoughts on the show. First off, prices were high, especially at first glance, but there were still plenty of deals to be found. Like I said with the Astounding Science Fiction, it's just one of those things that you've got to get out there and look for. If you're just wanting to walk the main drag, the main aisles, you're not going to find the deals. The big dealers on the main aisles have the usual big dealer prices. Chances are they're going to have what you want, but they're pretty much going to make you pay for it. I like to think of them as the comic book convenience stores. If you're looking for something, they're going to have it. But, you know, the price of ammo in the field is very high, and I just think that's what you can expect to find at that kind of booth. It's going to be flashy, it's going to catch your eye, and it's probably going to make your head spin when you look at the price tag. That's just the way it is. And, you know, obviously they're doing something right because they always have the good books. They always seem to be getting more of them. They're always seemingly having good shows. So if that business model works for them, that's great. I don't tend to waste a lot of my time there. I find that the deals are mostly hiding in the side aisles. You get into the mom and pop booths, the little inline booths that are just 10 by 10 or 10 by 20. That's where the magic happens, in my opinion. The smaller local or regional vendors, you know, they typically don't have the big flashy setups or the premier booth placements, but they're there to sell comics. And that's what I found at Heroes again this year, just period. The people that were not the big dealers, they were not your national brand dealers, they were there to sell comics. Heroes is the place to sell comic books, and if you roll in with reasonable prices, good books, it doesn't matter what you bring, there's somebody there that is shopping for that. You're going to make some sales, and those people are just excellent examples of it. Another thing I found is that if you make a reasonable offer, especially when you're dealing with some of these smaller dealers or regional vendors, the people who seem like they want your business and are there to actually sell books, if you make that reasonable offer, chances are you're going to make a deal because, like I said, they are there to sell comics. They don't want to take comics home and send you home with cash. They'd much rather give you the comics and leave with your money at the end of the day. I know that's how I feel. I know that's how all my other vendor friends are. And it's just that simple. When you find the people with prices that make sense, those are the people that you can typically do business with. One of the other things that still really impresses me about Heroes is the variety of comics and collectibles available at the show. It's just second to none. It doesn't matter if you want 50-cent boxes, if you want $1 boxes, you want $5 boxes, if you want some of the biggest books that are out there in the hobby, chances are you're going to find them at this show. Whether or not the pricing is going to be the best, it's hard to say. It depends on who has them. But The variety of comics and collectibles available at this show, again, is second to none. Short of SDCC or NYCC, there's no other show going where you're going to regularly see the quality of books in the room as you will at Heroes. It's just, it doesn't happen anymore. So many shows are Comic-Cons in name only, and I think that's where Heroes shines. It is still a comic book centric show. I said this when I was talking to Swaggle about Heroes the other day. Heroes Con is still 80% comics and 20% everything else at worst case. That is so much better than any other Comic-Con out there right now. At Heroes, you might see a booth that has 2 Batman 1s, but right behind it you might find a booth with some really great discount boxes to dig through. Seriously, whatever you're looking for, as long as it's comics related, you will find it at Heroes. Original art, toys, supplies, t-shirts, and fudge. There's this company that sells fudge out of Pennsylvania. They're at a lot of the Midwest shows. I successfully avoided them this time, but my God, they're awesome. Check them out. I think it's like copper stone or copper something. They will be hard on your waistline, but man, it's good. Like I said, Heroes gets the mix right. It's 80% comics, 20% random unrelated junk at worst case. I really think it's probably closer to 85 to 90% comics and 10 to 15% fluff. Thankfully, there are no people selling insurance or gutters at Heroes Con. I'm not saying they weren't there, but I didn't see any recruiting stations at Heroes. It's comics, almost entirely comics. No lightsabers, no pop dealers. It's a show for comics people, by comics people, and I think that's what makes it great. Ultimately, after going to the show twice now, I feel like Heroes Con is almost a lifestyle, not an event, okay? As great as the show is, it's just an excuse to get together and hang out with some awesome people and at some amazing events. Friday night, you have the drink and draw. Saturday night, it's the big art auction. And it's also a really easy show to attend. Charlotte is a major hub for American Airlines, so flights in and out are plentiful. At least that's the way they were for me in the Midwest here. It's a 15-minute Uber ride from the airport to the convention center. Hotels uptown where the convention center is are everywhere. Again, hotels are everywhere. I don't think you could throw a baseball in a 2-block radius of the convention center and not hit a hotel at some point. And just in general, Charlotte's uptown is amazing. There are so many restaurants, so many bars in the area. Once you arrive at the con, you can just completely immerse yourself. There's no reason to go anywhere else unless there's just some place specifically that you want to go. Me personally, I go to this barbecue joint. It's a 10-minute Uber ride and it's amazing. But if you don't want to, there is no reason to leave uptown for anything over the course of the weekend. And kind of my last thought on the show, I went with 2 people who'd never been to Heroes Con before. And over the course of the weekend, as we're walking around, it just made me smile every time I heard them say, and it's something you hear just over and over again, Heroes is the best comic convention I've ever been to. They don't say it in a way in like they're trying to convince themselves, or I don't know how else one would say it, but it's just almost like they can't keep it inside how impressed they are with the show. Like you walk through this convention hall and it can take a bit of time to walk from one end of it to the other, and it's just comics everywhere. And you realize it honestly is the best comic show, best comic convention you've ever been to. People mean it when they say it, and it's not just said in passing. It's shared repeatedly because it does not exist anywhere else. I've been to shows all over the place, and I've never seen anything else like Heroes. So ultimately, I'm one of those people. I still say, even after only 2 times attending a show, Heroes is the best convention I've ever been to. It's a very large show, and it's very full of comic dealers, which is why I go to Comic Cons, why I go to comic shows. I don't want to see all the other crap. I'm there for comic vendors. How many major Comic Cons do you go to where there are more than 10 to 15 comic dealers total, regardless of the size of the show? how many Comic Cons do you go to that there are less than 10 comic dealers, period. You know, it's awful the number of times I hear people talk about going to a comic show or a comic convention and there are 4 or 5 people selling comics at the entire Comic Con. That's not a Comic Con, that's a pop culture celebration. You know, they've just absconded with our name. It's crazy. And really, outside of San Diego or New York, there's no other show in the world like Heroes, period. Now, sadly, I think Heroes is all that remains of the classic comic convention. You know, it's our one remaining link to what used to be, and to me, it's worth supporting just for that. Will I be at Heroes every year? I don't know, but I'd like to be. Scheduling can be an issue. It often falls on Father's Day weekend, which is a problem. You know, it can be tough to work around that sometimes. Now, fortunately, 2025 and 2026 were both on weekends other than Father's Day, so I hope to return next year. But the real question is, have you been to Heroes Con? And if not, why not? What are you waiting for? In my opinion, you're missing out. It 100% gets my seal of approval. Okay, and to bring it on home, one of the big events of the weekend was CGC doing on-site grading at the show. Now, outside of the snafu first thing Friday morning, where the express drop-off line was anything but express, things went pretty well with that. And despite my grumpiness while waiting in line, I'm always happy to take advantage of on-site grading. You just have to remember to prioritize dropping off your books as soon as possible to ensure that you're going to get them back before the show closes, because if not, then you basically have to wait for them to be mailed, and that's no fun. It kind of defeats the whole purpose. Additionally, I do want to share my appreciation for the Heroes Con crew. The show is very generous with their press passes, and more so the privileges that come with those passes than any other show that I'm aware of. They were nice enough to issue me a press pass, which meant I got in all 3 days for free. And unlike at most other shows I've been to, the press pass comes with the same floor rights and access as a vendor or a guest pass, which is phenomenal. As a vendor, you get really spoiled having early and late access to the floor, and to be able to have that opportunity at the show made for a great experience as a content creator. On that note, it was also great to be able to get to meet so many other people from the YouTube and Instagram side of the hobby, and my God, were we everywhere. Honestly, I saw so many people running around shooting content. I actually put my camera away for a good part of the weekend because it just didn't seem like the right thing to be doing. I recorded a little bit on Thursday, but Friday was all business, working the magic to make that Crime Patrol 15 happen. And once that deal was sealed, I basically took most of Saturday off to just chill. I knew the show was going to be insanely busy, so after showing up fashionably late in the morning, I snuck out for most of the afternoon before returning right at the end of the show to shoot some footage. The footage you saw at the beginning of the video, actually. Which is why you can actually see where I was going. Most of the crowd had already thinned out by the time I went back to the show. And I finished up shooting some clips on Sunday morning before I had to head out to the airport. Ultimately, I just really didn't want to be that guy who experienced the show through the screen of my camera. I was happy I was able to get what I needed in a short amount of time and really focus on being present at the show and enjoying it in the moment, as opposed to just waiting to experience until I got home and started editing footage, like I'm sure some people are gonna discover. And you know, if that's their thing, that's awesome. I hope they had a great time, and it was still great to see them. All conventions follow a similar path to me. You spend weeks and months anticipating the show. Then it's finally time for the show. And once you get there, time moves incredibly fast, and the next thing you know, it's all over and you're back to waiting for next year. Heroes Con 2025 was 100% that way for me this year. I was incredibly excited to be able to return to the show for the first time in 9 years, and it was so worth the wait. I trusted that I would have fun and enjoy the trip regardless of the show's outcome, after setting some pretty specific and stringent expectations for myself. I didn't want to come to a show like Heroes and walk out with a stack of books. That's just not why I was there. I wanted to do exactly what I wound up doing, finding one or two books that were not your typical run-of-the-mill variety, yet also really meaningful to me, and I wanted to bring those home. And to me, Heroes is a show where almost any collector can do that same thing. At HeroesCon, you can find anything and everything, and I hope to see you there doing it next year. Collect responsibly, and I'll see you in the next one.